So welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, July 25th, 2004. And everyone's welcome at a British Empire Study Group meeting. You don't need to be a member. You don't need to collect British stamps. Just enjoy the subject matter. Again, I'm going to shout out to Charlie Mead because I think it's always worth it. Great logo he designed. And now for tonight's presentation, I'm going to introduce Rob Lutens to talk about our speaker. Rob?
Thank you, Joan. Welcome everyone to this evening's program, an enhanced presentation of Sudan military history with Jamie Smith. Sudan was the largest country in Africa until 2011, yet relatively little has been written about its turbulent history. It was jointly ruled by Britain and Egypt from 1899 until 1956. After agreement between Father Egypt and Mother England, Sudan became independent on the 1st of January, 1956. Since then, Sudan has been ruled by a succession of unstable civilian and military governments. The country's been in a state of civil war for many years, and human rights abuses are widespread. This evening's presentation covers the period from 1867 to the First World War, concentrating on Kitchener's advance before the Battle of Omdurman, but also bringing in other areas like the Abyssinian War, British Somaliland, and Uganda, where applicable to the Sudan military history. Now, a few words about our presenters this evening, Jamie Smith and Adele Bulpit, his digital support. Jamie Smith was born in Warwickshire in January of 1935 and lived in Stratford-upon-Avon for 17 years, which is where he began collecting stamps. He left school at the age of 14 and started out chef training just after his 15th birthday. He joined the Royal Air Force at the age of 17 as a chef and then left the service after serving 13 years. In 1966, he moved as a family to South Africa, eventually settling in Vereeniging for the next 40 years. While in South Africa, he was an active member of the Pretoria, Johannesburg, Vereeniging, and Wanderers Philatelic Societies. At the same time, Jamie held UK memberships in the British East Africa Study Circle, the Chinese Society of London, and the Royal Philatelic Society of Great Britain. In 2006, Jamie returned to Stockport in the United Kingdom, soon becoming a member of several local philatelic groups. However, the only society he currently belongs to is Poynton, where he serves as their secretary. Jamie retired at the age of 83. The problem then became what to do next with the next 80 years. Well, using the newfound time on his hands, he's devoted much of it producing philatelic presentations from his many collections. What started out as 20 presentations has now grown close to 90. Jamie's wish is to create philatelic programs that can globally share using tools such as Zoom programs. He wants very much to encourage new blood into our wonderful hobby and believes the hobby must go digital to capture the interest of the youth market. Old school philatelic books and stuffy meetings probably won't even, show up on their radar. Adele Bulpit, she lives in Benoni, Gauteng, South Africa, and is currently the president of the Pretoria Philatelic Society. She's also the newest member of the editorial board of the Pretoria Philatelic Society National Magazine, the South African Philatelist. She has been working closely with Jamie for the past 3 years, working hard at digitizing his entire collection. Adele's very active on Zoom with different societies and fully embraces modern technologies within the philatelic field. So without further ado, let me give you our esteemed speaker for this evening, Jamie Smith.
Well, A, thanks for inviting me, and B, thanks for the introduction. At the end, Adele is the IT expert. If you want to ask her questions as well, we're anxious to get other people to get Zooms onto the internet, so she's there. She's smiling, but she'll answer any questions. That gives me time to think. Right, let's try share screen. Sudan Military Postal History Part 1. This presentation covers the period of 1867 until the beginning of World War I, and it does stretch the limits a little bit because it also includes British Somaliland, the Abyssinian campaign, and a cover from Uganda, all of which are part of the general history that appertaining to this area. Muhammad Ali, the Caliph of Egypt, hoped to expand Egyptian influence and create an empire of his own. In 1805, he and then later his son moved into the Sudan, and using Sudanese troops, Egyptian troops, often officered by officers from Great Britain, America, and a couple of European powers. When Britain invaded Egypt in 1882, she became interested in the area, and it was to become the center of British military activity towards the end of the 19th century. This exhibit tries to capture some of the atmosphere and the activities of the period, mainly from the British aspect. I have typed the story out here if you want to read for a few seconds before we move on. A cover from the Abyssinian Field Force base at Zula in Eritrea. That is the area of the Egyptian Sudan at that time. The time period here being 1867 to 1868. The cover is self-centered as an AD with presumably a kiss for his mother at the bottom left-hand corner there. The cover is from Captain Anthony Durand of the 10th Bombay Infantry of the Bombay Army. While stationed in Zula in the Egyptian Sudan prior to the invasion of Abyssinia, it is addressed to his mother in Guernsey. The cover would have been transferred to a P&O mailboat off the island of Jebel Tir in the Red Sea before being offloaded in Marseille. You can see at the top left-hand corner the manuscript instructions via Marseille, which of course was in France, and that would be for delivery then across France into Guernsey. I have added a note at the bottom. During this period, Zulu was ruled by Egypt with Ottoman consent and considered part of the Sudan. As Egypt had designs on Abyssinia, they were later to be defeated by the emperor of Abyssinia. As I say, going back to the note, it paid Egypt to allow the British troops to use their territory at that time for the invasion of Abyssinia. I brought the previous cover over to show the strikes. The cover is stamped with the East India stamp, 6 annas and 8 pies. It was cancelled on the 15th of December 1867. The next strike is the FF, the Field Force, which was cancelled at the military post office at Zulu. Bottom left of those 4 strikes is the second strike of the Field Force. And then bottom right is the Field Force Abyssinia strike, dated the 17th of the 1st. It can be seen that it took a month for the cover to travel back along the line of communication from the either the 20 miles of railway that had to be constructed, or from the cart track that was also being constructed into Abyssinia. On the bottom left is the India Mail strike from the P&O liner, indicating that the cover was fully paid to Great Britain. Captain Anthony Durand, who was the sender of the previous cover from the Abyssinian campaign. British and Egyptian troops in the Sudan. The main fighting force in the early days was the Egyptian army, and I show these here preparing to leave to go to the Sudan, marching through the streets of Cairo. In the Sudan, stamps of Egypt were used, overprinted Sudan, and later Sudan was to issue its own stamps, and I show an airmail stamp from 1931. Past the period we're discussing, but it shows the statue of General Gordon in Khartoum. Muhammad Ali had theoretically conquered the Sudan and added it to Egypt, but there was always opposition from the dervish tribesmen under the Mahdi. Several expeditions went down. Some of those expeditions were led later by British officers working for the Egyptian government, and in the case of Hicks, they were annihilated. When the British took over in the early 1880s, they started to take more interest in the Sudan. The French then took an interest in the Sudan, so the British had to take over completely. Previously, they had sent small expeditions under Kitchener, and in 1896, Kitchener led a expedition down into the Sudan to retake the country, to defeat the dervishes under the Mahdi, and to keep the French out. There had been, or there was to be, an incident with the French at Fashada, the British eventually coming out on the top. Egyptian troops in the Sudan, postcard in the centre there, with an inset of the Turkish Caliph, the Muslim leader, and the two cards on the sides are margarine cards. The first showing a Sudanese soldier depicted on a home colonial advertising card for margarine, as is the second, which depicts a Sudanese cavalry trooper. A postcard and a Churchman's cigarette card depicting the Mahdi's troops, in this case dervish. One on the left is Imam, and the one on the right is the ordinary dervish soldier. This is a tuppenny concession rate on a cover from HMS Ulysses at Suakim in the Sudan. It is from the Sullivan's correspondence. Sullivan was an artisan who had been on HMS Griffin in the Indian Ocean on the anti-slave patrols between Aden and Zanzibar. Here he is in Suakin, and it is the British showing the flag during the early days of the Mahdist War and a few days before the siege of Khartoum by Mahdist forces. The siege led to the murder of General Gordon, and later British troops were sent in under Lord Kitchener, and that finalised when the Mahdi was defeated at the Battle of Omdurman. A cutting from the period. This is an internet image and two photographs of photographs. They are in my collection. In February 1885, the British attempted to build a 289 mile long, that's 400 kilometres, railway line between Sukin, that is Sukin, or often spelt with an M, as in the cutting. The line was between Sukin and Berber, so that Berber could become a base for operations against Khartoum. The railway was under the direction of General Sir Gerald Graham, commander of the Sukin Field Force that had been sent out to protect the railway against rebel attack. The material that was sent out was inferior. The Mahdist troops kept attacking them, and they only completed 20 miles of that railway. The military in the Sudan depicted on cigarette cards. The enlarged one shows the Battle of Abu Klea in 1885. This is depicted on a Gallagher cigarette card. Top right is the Royal Warwickshire Regiment, and they fought at the battles of Atbara and Omdurman, the last in 1898. And at the bottom right, the Egyptian camel battery carried on a camel. The best known part of the Sudanese history of the period is the Egyptian expeditionary force that was led by Field Marshal Kitchener, who was called the Sirdar. He led a force of British and Egyptian troops, so he was representing the British government and the Egyptian government. The idea was to relieve Gordon in Khartoum. Unfortunately, Gordon was killed by the Mahdist troops, but Kitchener defeated the Mahdi and his dervish troops at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898. I show on the left there a photograph on a postcard of Field Marshal Earl Kitchener. The two flags representing the two armies, the joint army of Great Britain and the Sultan of Egypt. And on the bottom right there, one of the points that's not so well known is the fact that Kitchener used Indian gun batteries, and they were drawn by oxen. The oxen brought rinderpest into Africa, and the rinderpest was to kill off 90% of the cattle in Africa and the wild game, which included buffalo, wildebeest, other antelope, and even warthogs. Kitchener became Sirdar in 1892. In January 1885, Gordon had been defeated and killed when the Mahdi took Khartoum. It was only in 1895 that Kitchener was given the orders to retake the Sudan. The British and the Egyptians already had troops at Wadi Alpha in the Sudan. This cover here is from a C.H. de Rougmont of the Royal Artillery, and he is stationed at Wadi Alpha camp. It is dated the 3rd of June 1896, and it is addressed into London. Captain C.H., that's Cecil Henry de Rougemont, was in the Royal Artillery, and he was later to become a lieutenant colonel. That was during World War I. This is a continuation of the previous cover, showing the various cancellations and strikes. The cover was dated the 27th of July 1896. It was cancelled at Wadi Alpha camp on the 30th of June 1896. Then it transited in Cairo. Being addressed into Paddington, it was received there on the 14th of August 1896, where it was taxed twopence halfpenny. Now the rate was twopence halfpenny, but no stamps were available because he was on active service. He was only taxed the postage, the normal postage. This is known as a sympathetic tax. This is a list of the NCOs of the Royal Artillery who were known to be in the Sudan and thought to be at the Battle of Omdurman. The photograph is from Sukin, which was taken in 1885, of the Royal Artillery on parade, and in the list of officers you can see Captain C.H. de Rougmont. He was wounded during the Battle of Omdurman. This is a cover from the NCOs of the Royal Artillery who were known to be in the Sudan and thought to be marked at the Battle of Dongola expedition, but there was a question mark. And photograph is from Sukin, which was taken cover from the previous slide, showing
Sorry, just stop your presentation,
Royal
Jamie.
Artillery on
Jamie?
parade.
Jamie?
And in the list of officers, you can
Jamie?
see Captain
Yes, stop the presentation. Press escape twice.
He was Muhammad Ali.
Press escape. Just close the presentation. You were on slide number 18, and then you can go on from slide 18. Close your presentation first, quickly.
What, stop share or just close?
No. Just close the presentation. Sorry, guys. Open it again.
Is that right? Huh?
Yeah. Yes. Just go to slide 18 for me so that I can see if there's one sound or two. I only see one, so you should be able to share from. Go from current slide.
Yeah.
You were on slide 18. Go from current slide. There we go.
This is a cover from the previous slide showing the sender and his address. The sender was later to become Lieutenant General Sir Arthur Thomas Sluggett. He had all his decorations there, and he lived from the 24th of November 1857 until the 27th of the 11th, 1929. He was a doctor and a British army officer, taking not only part in the Sudanese wars, he was later to fight in, or to be a doctor in the First World War of 1914-1918. The back stamps, together with the Wadi Alpha camp, showed the route taken. As I say, it was posted on board the boat going up the Nile. The Wadi Alpha was applied when the ship docked. There is a Cairo transit, and it arrived in the High Street box office at Tunbridge Wells on the 12th of September 1896, and then there is a Langton receiving strike the following day. Muhammad Ali had theoretically conquered the Sudan and added it to Egypt, but there was always opposition from the Dervish tribesmen under the Mahdi. Several expeditions went down. Some of those expeditions were led later by British officers working for the Egyptian government, and in the case of Hicks, they were annihilated. When the British took over in the early 1880s, they started to take more interest in the Sudan. The French then took an interest in the Sudan, so the British had to take over completely. Previously, they had sent small expeditions under Kitchener, and in 1896, Kitchener led a expedition down into the Sudan to retake the country, to defeat the dervishes under the Mahdi, and to keep the French out. There had been, or there was to be, an incident with the French at Fashada, the British eventually coming out on the top. This is a cover from the British Indian troops who were stationed in Sukin, which at the time was Sudan's main port. There's a 1 anna Indian soldiers and seamen's envelope, and it was used by Chatter Singh, who was the head clerk for the Indian military post office in Sukin. Indian troops had been sent to the Sudan in 1896. They were to stay until 1898. They'd been sent there to garrison the port and the forts to relieve other troops that would be British troops for active service. They were also involved in fighting against the religious Mahdist Sudanese under the religious leader Mohammed Ahmed bin Allah, who had proclaimed himself the Mahdi, that is, the chosen one of Islam. This is the same cover, but showing the origin of the 1 anna soldiers and seamen's envelope. It had originally been a 9-pi postal stationery item, but it had to be increased to 1 anna when the rate to England was increased in 1893. The original cover was printed by Thomas de la Rue in London, and it is thought that it was surcharged in India. Military telegraph sent by Lord Kitchener. Lord Kitchener was not only the leader of the expeditionary force to take back the Sudan under British Egyptian control, but he was the Sirdar, or he was known as the Sirdar. The telegram is sent from Abadia, which I can find no mention of it, but as Kitchener set up his headquarters in Wadi Halfa, just inside of the Sudan, I presume that it comes from that area. The battle was to take part, that is the Battle of Omdurman. That was in September of the same year, 1898. The telegraph is asking when the Adjutant General Haig, who was 37 at the time, would be arriving to be with him in the Sudan. Cover from Second Lieutenant E.H.S. Cater from Kushar to Penshurst in Kent, England. I managed to find an image of the officer. He was in the Royal Engineers, and he was one of the 8 Royal Engineer officers involved in the building of the Dongola and Desert Railways. He was to die in Wadi Halfa in the Sudan on the 21st of February 1897. I have dealt with the cover over the next 3 slides. This is the same cover as the last slide. I have indicated where it states that it is from Kushar, that's kosher. There are various spellings. The cover was sent on the 10th of August 1896, and I show a map on the right hand side from the internet with the position of the fort at Kosher. The railway ran from that point south to cover or to cut off that bend in the river, and it was used to carry troops and their supplies south in the war against the Mahdi. This is still the same cover from Lieutenant Cutter, and I show here the cover and the caches and manuscript writing that were applied in the Sudan and Egypt on the way home. The cover is an Egyptian 1 piastre postal stationery envelope from Kushar, and that was a fort where the Battle of Guinness was fought in 1885. The cover took 4 days to get to Wadi Halfa and a further 7 days to reach Cairo. In the manuscript, it reads, "No stamps available for any overweight." That is, if there is any, then it gives the place kosher. There are other caches which I'll deal with on the next slide, which were applied in the United Kingdom. This is the last of the 4 slides that I have prepared for this cover from Second Lieutenant Katur. The cover left Katur, went via Wadi Halfa, then Cairo to England. It was addressed into Penshurst, but once there it was redirected and it received a second cachet, the Tonbridge Station Office. That was in the morning of the same day, and then it reached Lincoln on the sorting tender at 11:45 that evening, all on the same day. kind of a document not in my collection, unfortunately. It was sent to me via the internet. It shows the 8 engineers who were involved in building the railway across the desert before the Battle of Omdurman. They were to receive the Sudan Medal. Note that 2 of them died in Wadi Alfa from malaria. They are both mentioned there. And it also mentions that their medals were not to be prepared. 5 millimes Egyptian postage stamp overprinted Sudan to pay the letter rate from Halfa, that's Wadi Halfa, to a British military officer in Alexandria. The station, the camp at Wadi Halfa had been enlarged for the invasion of the Sudan by the British troops, which culminated in the Battle of Omdurman. Kitchener had his headquarters at Wadi Alfa, and the reason it was such an important centre was it was a port for people coming up the Nile. It was the railway connection for the railway down to Khartoum, and it was also the centre for the telegraph service for the area. This is a cover from the Royal Warwickshire Regiment in the Sudan, addressed back into Birmingham, England. Birmingham, England is where the Royal Warwicks had one of their bases. The other one was at Budbrook Barracks in Warwick. The cover has the Nile Expeditionary Force. Remember, it's normally called the Egyptian Expeditionary Force, but here it's called the Nile Expeditionary Force. It is a Egyptian postal stationery letter overprinted Sudan. It's been cancelled at Damali, then again transit at Wadi Halfa and Alexandria, and finally it has got to Birmingham. It is taken from July 1898 until August 1898. Photographic postcard depicting the Egyptian artillery at the Battle of Omdurman. The postcard was produced in Khartoum and is period, so it is probably correct. 1 piastre, that's the officer's rate, on cover from Major RAF Meiklejohn, OBE of the Royal Warwickshire Regiment at the Omdurman battlefield. It is addressed into General Sir Edwin Colon in Simla, India. This was after the Battle of Atbara, and the final battle to defeat the Mahdi's forces was when this cover was sent in September 1889. This is the cover from the previous slide, and it shows the journey taken by the cover from the Battle of Omdurman to Simla. The first backstrike for transit was Cairo. That was on the 30th of July 1899, and then the cover was sent by the ship from Port Said to Bombay, where it received the Sea Post Office on the 7th of August 1899, and was finally received at Simla on the 14th of August 1899. Uganda Expeditionary Force into northern Uganda and Equatoria in the southern Sudan, 1898 to 1899. I show a campaign cover from late in the campaign, from the Broome expedition into northern Uganda and southern Sudan, sent by the leader of the expedition, Lieutenant Colonel W.A. Broome, to his wife in Winchester, England. The stamps, the 3 annas, made up of 6 half-anna stamps, have been pen cancelled by the sender while on the campaign. The cover has then been transported back to Mombasa in British East Africa, where the stamps have been cancelled, so they're actually transit strikes, and then there is a Winchester arrival cachet on the reverse. The envelope flap has the crest of the 1st Baluch Battalion on the reverse. This is a continuation from the previous page, previous slide. The Northern Uganda and Southern Sudan Expedition Force of 1898-1899. This is the background. With the capture of Khartoum in 1885 by the Mahdi, the Ottoman Egyptian administration of the Sudan collapsed. Equatoria, the extreme southern province of the Sudan, was nearly cut off from the outside world. Emir Pasha, who was the appointed governor of Equatoria, was informed in February 1886 that the Egyptian government would abandon Equatoria. Arrangements were made for Stanley to rescue Emin Pasha from Equatoria, which appears to have been a disaster as Emin Pasha did not want to leave. There is also evidence that a second governor was sent. In the confusion, little or nothing was done to extract the Sudanese troops who had been the military force for that province. Wages were not paid, they were left to their own resources. Consequently, they mutinied and killed their British officers and went on a rampage throughout the area. In December 1897, the 27th Baluch Regiment of Bombay, that's a light infantry regiment, were dispatched under Lieutenant Colonel W.A. Broome to Uganda and southern Sudan to quell the rebellion. The battalion consisted of 14 officers and 743 Indian ranks. They were added to at a later date by military from Uganda, and on the way through British East Africa there was a small battle in the Taita Hills in southern British East Africa, which had nothing to do with the Sudanese mutiny. The battalion was again in action in the Gondokoro area of the then Equatoria province before the rebellion was crushed. The battalion returned to Mombasa before setting sail for India later in May 1899. I show a military cover on the left into French Sudan, and on the right I show a postcard which is a map of French Somaliland. Below I show a map with the 2 areas, and it was between these 2 areas that the French wanted to build a road, so that they could get to their possessions in Madagascar, India and the Far East without having to go all the way around the Cape. and B, they wanted to tax the rich caravans that were going across the Sahara. On the left, the French flag. On the right, Major Marchand. Major Marchand travelled from West Africa with a small French expedition, and he went through what was British and Egyptian Sudan, and his presence was known when he arrived at Fashoda on the River Nile. Kitchener immediately sent down a small force with gunboats, and the two parties were fairly friendly. There was no fighting. But back in Europe, Britain and France almost went to war. Eventually things were settled down. In the centre there I show a French advertising card for chocolate depicting Major Marchand's arrival in Fashoda. That was on the 10th of July 1898. German postcard depicting the military officers who later controlled the Sudan. The postcard is a souvenir of Khartoum. It's been used in Germany in 1923, and it is entitled The Makers of Sudan. It depicts Lord Kitchener, who was Sirdar, Sir Rudolph von Staten Pasha, who was the Inspector General, and Sir Reginald Wingate Pasha, who was Governor General and later Sirdar. Quarter Anna, that is 3 pies, East Indian Postal Stationery postcard from Bombay to the British Central African Rifles, that's the CAR in Aden. There the card has been redirected to Berbera in British Somaliland. Note on the top left hand of the card there is a Sea Post Office transit strike, that's between Bombay and Aden. Actually the ship would be going to Port Said and returning to Bombay. The cancellations, that's the post office cancellations, are Bombay, Aden and Berbera, the last being in British Somaliland. I have dealt with the card over the next 3 slides. On each slide I've brought the card forward for reference. This slide shows the reverse of the card, showing that it is commercial and it is related to the military. I'm not quite sure what has been sent. It says Indian something, but I can't understand that. The card itself is addressed to the President of the Messing Committee, that's known as the PMC, and it is for the Central African Rifles, that's the CAR. The riflemen were not from Central Africa, they were Mauritians under British officers. And note that the King's African Rifles, who presumably replaced them in 1902, were recruited from East Africa. In this cover I show the route taken by the card. Also I've included a map of the general area concerned. On the map you can see Aden at the top and Berbera directly below in northeast Africa. The route taken by the cover was from Bombay. It travelled by ship, and on the top right you can see the Sea Post Office strike. That's dated the 13th of August. The next point is the Aden strike at the bottom left. That is either a receiving or a forwarding strike, because the card had to be sent to catch up with the troops who had already left for British Somaliland, Berbera that is. There should be a receiving strike and I would have thought a forwarding strike. I'm not sure which one this is, but I can only find the one strike. That's dated the 17th of August, and then at the bottom right we have the receiving strike in Berbera on the 22nd of August 1900. A scan of a photograph in the Navy and Army Illustrated magazine dated the 12th of May 1900 of the 2nd Regiment of the British Central African Rifles while they were still in St. Louis in Mauritius. This was a few months before they were redeployed to Aden and then into British Somaliland. British troops in Somaliland. I show a postcard depicting a detachment of the 1st Hampshire Regiment on trek. The word trek means to travel and is taken from the Old Dutch and into Afrikaans. The regiment had been fighting in the Boer War and had probably brought the word back with them. A cover with no postage is from the Somaliland force, the military force that was chasing the Mad Mullah. There is a manuscript, no stamps available. The postage should have been a penny, and 1 penny has been charged as tax. This is the same as the shortage, which means it was a sympathetic tax. Normally the shortage would have been doubled. In this case it was left exactly the same because the sender couldn't get stamps. Sudan military telegraph stamps were issued from the 1st of March 1898. The stamps were printed by De La Rue of London, and they were printed by typography. The watermark was star and crescent or a rosette. The perforation was comb perforation 14. The stamps were issued for use on telegrams from 1898 to 1901. They depicted a contingent of Sudan Camel Corps crossing the desert and passing a line of telegraph wires. The stamps were perforated centrally to facilitate use on the receipt portion of a telegraph form. Representation of the Sudan military telegraph stamps, which were issued from the 1st of March 1898. Photographic postcard depicting the Camel Corps of the Sudan Defence Force. The SDF was a locally recruited force. It was recruited and began in 1925. It was to help the police in case of unrest and to defend the borders. They were to fight the Italians during the Second World War. Incoming cover from England to an officer serving with the Egyptian army in the Sudan. The cover has been folded before being sealed with gold wax. The folding was probably done after the stamps had been applied to leave the cover unbalanced. The origin is Dover on the 10th of October 1913. It was received in Alexandria as a transit strike, and then it travelled down the Nile on the Nile boat, because there is a Nile Shalal Alpha TPO number 1, and that is dated the 20th of the 11th, 1913. This is a cover from the invasion of Darfur after the revolt in 1916 of the Sultan. The cover is 5 millimes on a military cover sent via the civil post during the military invasion and occupation of the Sultanate of Darfur in 1916. The sender, Major M. Huddleston, was the officer in charge of the Camel Corps at the Battle of Berenguer on the 22nd of May 1916. This cover is a little bit later. It is the same area. It is from Nahud. That is spelled in the local spelling of N Nahud, and it was sent on the 16th of November 1916. It is taken from the middle of November until the 23rd of the 1st to get as far as the riverboat on the Nile. It is addressed into London and it has been censored. I continue the story of the invasion on the next slide. This is the same cover as the last slide, and this is the story behind the cover and the invasion of Darfur in 1916. The invasion of Darfur was a military invasion and occupation of the Sultanate of Darfur, an independent country at the time, by the British military and the Sultanate of Egypt. The operation took place from the 16th of March to the 6th of November 1916. The Sultan of Darfur, Ali Dinar, had been reinstated by the British after their victory in the Mahdist War. But during the First World War, he grew restive, refusing his customary tribute to the Sudanese government and showing partiality to the Ottoman Empire in 1915. Now, Britain and Turkey were at war because Turkey had joined the Germans. Resulting from the rebellion, Serdar Reginald Wingate then organised a force of around 2,000 men under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Philip James Vanderleer Kelly. The force entered Darfur on the March of 1916 and decisively defeated the Fur Army at Berenguer. Major M. Huddleston, the sender of this cover, was the officer in charge of the Camel Corps at the battle. The capital Al-Fashir was occupied in May of 1916. Al-Dinar had already fled to the mountains, and his attempts to negotiate a surrender were eventually broken off by the British. His location became known, a small force was sent after him, and the Sultan was killed in action in November 1916. Now that is when this cover was sent. Subsequently, Darfur was fully annexed to the British administration of the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. It remained as part of the Sudan up to the independence. Photographic postcard depicting the British military barracks at Khartoum. Five Mills on a cover from Khartoum dated 6th of May 1917. It's been posted at the civilian post office in Khartoum, but the censorship on the bottom left to qualify for the 5 mil rate is from Camp Omdurman. And there endeth the first lesson.
It was wonderful, Jamie. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Some
You know,
fascinating
I've been through that a dozen times and I still find mistakes.
There's a question of why did the invasion take place in 1884?
1884. To get the 1884 was for the going in for the relief of General Gordon, which was before the expedition in to retake the Sudan. There were two invasions into the country. Well, I say invasions. The first was when the Mahdi had surrounded Khartoum and with General Gordon, and Gordon was murdered because the British government were hesitant to send anybody in. That part I've never been able to add anything into my collection, so that area is a little bit bare. Well, not a little bit bare, very bare. But one day, with luck, if I live long enough, maybe we can put something in there.
Okay. All right.
So Jamie, I'm just, for those of us who really didn't study history in that area, why did they want the Sudan again?
Because they'd taken over, they'd gone into Egypt in 1882, and Egypt held the Sudan, so the interest was there because they were already taking over. But the thing was, the Italians were trying to get in to the top end of the of Africa, and more important, the French were trying to cut across from from West Africa, from French Sudan across to Djibouti, so that they could get their people across to get to their colonies in the Indian Ocean and the Far East and in India at that time. The French also wanted to tax the caravans that were going across from east to west. And that is where the Fashade incident came in and nearly ended up in war between Britain and France.
That raises a question. Ahmed Abush was wondering if there are any covers from the Fashada incident.
I have never seen one. I don't know. Maybe some of the Sudanese boys, collectors, can tell us that. I have never seen anything.
Okay.
What it was, if there were, I would imagine they'd have come from the gunboats, because Kitchener sent gunboats down to Fashoda. So it wouldn't actually say for shoulder. I don't think it would just have the TPO or some cancellation from the boat.
Okay. Dan Edwards says he came in late, but he's got a question regarding internal mail. Was the internal mail sent via native couriers or British military personnel?
British military.
Okay. Are there any surviving covers or postal histories from that internal mail?
Again, I've never seen on the. You mean on the Egyptian period? There has to be, because of the overprinted postal stationery. There's quite a bit from the Egyptian with Egyptian stamps.
Right. Overprinted with Sudan?
Yeah, in French.
Right.
Using Egyptian stamps. Yeah.
All right. Do we have anybody with a question out there? I don't see any hands yet.
Thomas also wanted to know, he says there seems to be no documentation from the Sudanese government regarding all of these things that you portrayed. We can just assume what happened from the covers that you've got.
The Sudanese government was the Egyptian government. They controlled the Sudan.
Thank you. Then Carl also wanted to know on your last slide that says the end. Is that a cavalry officer shooting someone? Was it an internet picture or a postcard?
That's an internet picture.
Just to show the end. Thanks.
Just to show the end. That's not in my collection. I found a lot of difficulty being a loner, actually. I did bring Ian in on one of the covers just to make sure I got my facts straight and show him the evidence I'd put together, and he agreed with what I'd done, so I was happy with that. And you know, the other thing is that I couldn't find any information on the troops that were fighting for the Mahdi. I'm not so sure that they all came from the Sudan. I think a lot of them came from the sultans along that coast of the Red Sea and what became British Somaliland. And I think they all, well, I know they all at one time owed allegiance to the Sultanate in Turkey, and then that was handed over to Egypt. But I think they were all influenced by the Mahdi, and I think a lot of those troops came in from outside of the area. But I can't find any backup for my theory on that.
I see my friend Jerry Dutt from the France, and Dahomey is online here. What's your question, Jerry? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to. Quick question on the French connection. Was there any direct philatelic or postal conflict / cooperation in those areas at all that you have uncovered?
Nothing. I've never seen anything. I did put a cover in, but that was from France into the French Sudan, just to keep it as philatelic as I could, you know. When I say philatelic, I mean postal history wise. But I've never seen anything French from that expedition that Machad took in.
Thank you.
All right. Carl Barna asks a question about the last slide that you showed had a cavalry officer that was shooting at someone.
Yeah, Dali, can you bring it up? You see, the British used camels as well. There was a camel corps, and the same in British Somaliland. There was a camel corps.
Okay. Vincent Neal, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm way down in New Zealand, but thank you for a fascinating talk. I was interested some years ago when I found someone who was killed at the Battle of Suakim had the same name and was born in the same place as one of my ancestors. So I began to delve into this, and fortunately on the internet found that there was some material available from one of the correspondents, which had been copied, I think, by Google from the originals that are in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. I was able to obtain quite a bit of detail on how he'd been with the Royal Navy, attached with, I think, guns on the corners of squares as they advanced inland. Do you have any philatelic material from the actual battles of Suakim?
Not from the battles. No, I've just got that one cover from Suakim. They were trying to build a 400-mile railway, I think, but they only completed 20. But I have read that they were in squares fighting the Mahdi's troops, because they just kept attacking them. They had to come out in the end.
Thank you.
Richard Ropiak. Unmute yourself. There you go.
I found the cover that was addressed to the mess committee sort of amusing. I thought about it for a couple of minutes and said, aha, this is what the priorities are if you're a military unit out in the middle of nowhere, or relatively nowhere. You can't assume that food is going to get from point A to point B. So you have a committee. I just sort of found it interesting.
Yeah, but all officers' messes, even in my time, had a messing committee. Every officer's mess had a messing committee with the PMC as the president of the messing committee, and he ran the officers' mess. And I've seen the initials with people asking what they meant, and I used to work in officers' messes, so it was, I saw a lot of them.
In the United States, I believe the Army would have referred to it as a quartermaster corps, but that's beyond. No,
it wouldn't have been the quartermaster corps. The PMC would be elected from an officer, a senior officer, on that camp, in that mess.
Okay.
He's nothing to do with like the Army Catering Corps or the Royal Air Force Catering.
Okay, can you expand on the Central African Rifles that popped up on one of your letters?
Oh, that is very difficult to expand on because there's not an awful lot of material from it. Mike is here. He may have more information than what I put on. They went originally from what was British Central Africa, which was to become Nyasaland. They went to Mauritius. Then they moved from Mauritius up to Somaliland. Again, I've tried to study that in depth. Very difficult to get information on. Colin Fraser in New York has helped me quite a bit, but he struggles. And if we find anything, we send each other the information. To pick up a cover like that, you've got to be very lucky, and I was very lucky.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Richard, you seem to be assuming that the British military actually fed its officers. Typically, the officers were on their own as far as messing was concerned.
Well, in prior times, yes, the officers received an allowance, I believe. But eventually, officers' quarters were available as separate from the enlisted folks. I'm not sure how the history evolved, but to compare it to the British, it's not necessarily a stretch, but it's comparable history there.
All right.
Joseph.
Bowling.
Hi.
I have a question a little bit outside the time period that you're covering today. Do you know anything about the stamps that were overprinted, not valid for postage, 1 million during World War II? Was that a substitute for coinage that was not available?
I've no idea what you're talking about. Not valid for postage.
Correct.
I've never seen that.
Okay, well, Colin Narbeth knew something about them, but of course he's gone. I can no longer query him. So I bought one of these out of an Australian auction for about $250 because I've written a book on World War II military monies, and I figured that would go into the second edition if we ever got around to a second edition. And unfortunately, I don't have an image of it to show you.
What was the value?
The original value?
Well, no, what was the overprint value?
1 million.
But that's nothing.
Well, but was there a coin of 1 million denomination circulating in the 1940s?
No, I don't think so. 5 million was the lowest value stamp, but it
was a Sudanese.
It's the same as saying a halfpenny. You know, plus minus.
It was a 3 piastre stamp, Sudanese 3 piastre stamp.
Yeah, that's a little bit of money, yeah, but a million was nothing. It was 100. It was 1/100th of a piastre, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And anybody want to confirm?
Yeah, it was 100th of a piastre, 1,000th of an Egyptian pound.
Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.
The only use I could see for it would be as a circulating coinage of small denominations if they were unavailable during the war.
I couldn't see any other use to it, but I couldn't see what they could buy with it. It wouldn't have been, there were a lot of Indian troops there, Second World War, but surely if it had been Indian, they would have used their values. So it would have to have been for the, if it was military, it would have been for the Sudan Defense Force, and I can't see any use for it.
Yeah, okay. I just thought I would ask. Thank you.
Maybe it's one of Ian's entertainment tax stamps when they went to the Bioscope.
Well, the same terminology not valid for postage was applied to stamps in booklets, remember, where there were more stamps than the face value of the booklet. So one of the stamps would be overprinted, not value for postage, but it wouldn't have a surcharge.
Well, the surcharge is tiny. I missed it when I queried Colin Narvis about it. And after he replied and said, well, it should also say 1 million, I looked at it again, and sure enough, in very small font, it said 1 million with the Arabic one.
I've always understood there were 10 millions to a piastre, not 100. And I've just looked it up in a book and it's confirmed. It's 10 millions to a piastre, not 100.
Okay, but it's still
Okay, but it's still a thousandth of the Egyptian pound, hence the name million, yeah.
Right.
All right, any other questions?
gone quiet, isn't it?
Yeah. Are most of you guys from the forces group? Military forces? No. Okay. Anyone from the Sudanese Study Circle? Okay. So no resident experts. Well, Jamie, that was very interesting. I have to say, I know absolutely nothing about that area or the wars, and give me the Civil War, the War of 1812. Those wars, I'm not very familiar with, I'm afraid, but that's why these are very good. So, yeah, I was with you. I was like, half the names, they're not household names, at least here in the States, but they seem to roll off your tongue like they were good friends. Yeah. So.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't even say I was saying them right. Some of the South African ones I can get right, but I struggle with others.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. All right. Everyone's quiet. Is it too hot and no one wants to talk?
I just want to say that, with what Jamie has presented, you never really know what happens in these wars and where everybody was. And especially in Africa, things get lost and it's many years ago. So we can only guess, but this at least gives you a glimpse into what happened or potentially happened, because it's not something that you can alter now because it is written proof. And I mean, that is why we phylacteries, isn't it? So thank you for that and giving us a broader view on what happened there. Thanks, Jamie.
Welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie.
Adele, your group does a lot more of these discussions, right?
Yes, we try. But once again, you're reliant on the information that's in front of you. You only know what you know. So that is why we like to have these discussions, because what I know and what you know now, if we put it together, there's more information out there. And if it can be documented, it's better so. So, yeah.
The thing when you put it together, and Adele puts mine into videos, what happens in years to come? Where are we going to store them? There are other people who are doing them, but if we've got nowhere to store them for prosperity, they can still be lost with time.
I know we tried to put everything on YouTube because my guess would be that that would be archived if something ever happened to that, as well as our own site. So, and I know there's mixed feelings about putting it on YouTube, but especially if you're a society and you like to keep that for members only.
In Canada, the Philatelic Specialist Society encourages its members to have their presentations and videos and whatever stored on the PSSC website.
Oh,
yeah. Similarly, in South Africa, I've been suggesting to people that we should be recording presentations like Jamie's tonight. I've made a handful of these, not anywhere near his 90. But if we store these things on the website, they become reference documents for the future.
Oh, yes.
It also means that societies, after we've gone, can still access the information and even make an evening out of it.
Yeah, it's all legacy information.
Just to point out, I've now done, and Adele has made into videos 150.
wow.
And with the PSSC, the webmaster, Michelle Hood, actually encourages people or members or anybody actually, if they're disposing of their collections and exhibits, to actually send scans of them to the PSSC. And also the Green Foundation, some of you in Toronto, that some of you might be familiar with, and with Garfield Porch and whatnot.
Yeah.
They are starting to digitize a lot of information, and their latest newsletter and website has a lot of information where a lot of this type of information has been digitized and scanned and is available for future generations. And that'll get maintained. And also, for example, there was a website that belonged to a fellow called Ralph Trimble, who was an expert on fly speck and whatnot. When he passed away, he actually, I shouldn't say bequeathed, but he asked the Green Foundation to maintain that website so that it can be so it's there for future generations. So the Green Foundation will pay for the update, or not for the update, but for the maintenance fees on it. So,
Jerry, can we talk at some time in the future?
With me?
Yeah.
Sure.
Myself, just to because we're not sure what we're actually going to do with ours.
I think it's very important to digitize your collection, and if you can add your voice notes to it as well, because with Jamie's presentations that he's done, if he happens to close his album, it doesn't help me just having the scans, because there's a lot of knowledge around those slides that I don't know, and maybe other people don't know as well. So yes, it's good and well you have the pictures afterwards, but the picture alone doesn't mean anything without the surrounding information. And it is marvelous if you can have it. A lot of people retire and they get old and they can't get to clubs anymore. And we've got a few in South Africa that have now sold their collections via Spin. And it is now nice for them to be able to sit back and still view their material, and they can still show their material as opposed to just reminiscing about the material that was once theirs. So yeah, that is just something to consider. If you're on Zoom already, you're halfway there, you're not afraid of technology, it's just 2 steps extra to get there.
When you say close his album, I thought you were saying something else nicely.
I will neither confirm or deny.
Pete Helmkin, if you
The
got a
next
question.
challenge is to make sure people can find it too. It's got to be accessible. So if the Kazakhstan Philatelic Society has got a bunch of interesting papers on their website, are they findable by Google, or are they going to be lost there?
Yeah.
Jamie, if you if you need my email address,
Yeah,
you can
I'll
ask.
get it to him, Jerry, because
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea. I'd like to talk to you also. It would be nice to have a central place to send some videos if
Sure.
if
Oh, yeah.
you can.
The email address that you have for me probably reads Susan Pietrowski 74. That's because my email address no longer seems to be compatible with Zoom sessions. So my
Oh, wow.
email address is basically the same as what you sent to my wife, except instead of Susan, just put Jerry. The rest of it's identical.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that any library that's part of the Union catalogue would be a good repository, because that's searchable from the Royal Philharmonic Society of London, 2 or 3 libraries in the States, including the APRL, the Green, and more that I can't remember at the present time.
The hard challenge there, Duncan, is a lot of them don't want to take other people's material and digitize, either digitize it or put it on their website, which is
yes, the APRL does ask for you to do the scanning of your exhibit, or to take it there and scan it on their machine.
And they don't have a resource for videos.
Okay.
Right.
Hey,
And there
David,
is yeah. Well, Jerry, we'll talk elsewhere, because there's other ways to take these videos and convert them into like PowerPoints, and also get transcripts of them, which are searchable.
Yeah, I'm not sure what either the Green Foundation or the PSSC is prepared to do with other people's material, but I know that for example, the PSSC, the webmaster is always reminding or asking the members of the PSSC to think about preserving their things on their website.
Okay, Peter, sorry about that. We stopped you so many. So sorry.
That's okay. Pete Onkin, Sudan Study Group from the UK. It's way past my bedtime, so I'll make this a quick one. Just to answer Joe's question about the overprint not valid for postage, I'm using Stag. I don't know whether everybody's got a copy of this one, but anyway, it says a temporary shortage of the 1 millennium coin arose in the Darfur province. And then the overprinting of the stamps on the three piastre stamp was to replace the 1 millennium coin. So it was used as coinage. That was in 1941. 1942, that was.
Were the stamps put on cards as they were in the Rhodesias, or?
No, I think they were just used as ordinary stamps. They were just overprinted, not valid for postage, and the value of 1 mil.
At the time they were overprinted, the gum was removed.
Yeah.
So the genuine coins have a sort of a tan color on the back from the removal of the gum.
Yeah.
Some of the stamps have been re-gummed and put back in the market. This is all according to Colin Narbeth. And those are the ones that you want to steer clear of. And he had said that although he was a Sudanese specialist for a long time, he had never been able to acquire one of the original overprinted stamps.
All right. Well, this comes from Stag's sort of Bible on Sudan stamps. So yeah.
Well, thank you for chiming in.
That's okay. It's very late in the night in the UK, so I suddenly woke up when you said about the overprints.
Well, it definitely is something that would go into a book about World War II numismatics, because it has a numismatic application during the war.
Yeah, it was so basically it was Darfur province that ran out of 1 mil coins, and so they used the stamps to replace the coins.
Thank you.
Okay.
I wonder if there was a lot of that where a stamp was actually used as a coin. Because I've never heard that as a topic.
Well, in the Civil War, we had them, and that's
Yeah.
why they started putting them inside, the encasements to protect the stamp.
Golly, I thought those were just necklaces. No, only kidding.
Oh, those were circulating coins in those encasements.
I believe, I forget what era, I think around 1915, 1917, Russia did the same thing. They had stamps that were printed on thin cardboard that were valid for postage, but on the back there was a notation that it was also valid as coinage, had a silver value or whatever. And I believe the same thing happened in Italy at one time. I'm not sure exactly when, but I think in Italy they were actually encased in some kind of or encapsulated in something.
Well, we saw that also with the it's in the Boer War, and I can't remember the name of the something hole. Was it a high
Marshall Hole?
Marshall Hole.
Right.
That's
Okay.
up in the Rhodesias.
Where they were using revenue stamps on the backs of cards to represent a denomination. And in Syria in World War II, they had a 2.5 piastre and a 5 piastre that were revenue stamps placed on cards and used as circulating coinage. Very scarce. I've been able to get the 2.5. I've never seen the 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Around about 1970, Italy was using stamps, but I don't think they were ever officially made into or defined to be coinage. But when you bought something, they never had any change. And they would give you either stamps in lieu of coinage or bread rolls, which was all they could manage. And I don't know if the bread rolls were fresh or just going round and round and round in circulation.
Well, they
we did it with chappies.
Same thing, yeah.
In that Italian period, they all started printing mini assegnetti, which were low denomination pieces of paper guaranteed by the issuer and nobody else. So, they couldn't circulate very far from home.
They're like IOUs, yeah.
That was interesting. Well, Jamie, that was fabulous again. You just
thanks.
You also have the Notgeld in Germany.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Print on paper, very low denomination. Postal currency in the United States. Use the stamp design. Print on paper, no gum. Used for coinage during the Civil War.
Yeah, Civil War.
Apparently, the ones in Darfur were there were 60,000 of them overprinted and the gum washed off. So yeah, so they're not that rare. I don't think.
Well, that's interesting. So, okay. Well, I know it. Jamie, you're in England also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And
it's
even
early
later
morning
in South Africa for Adele.
I know, poor Adele.
And you, Ian.
So where are you at the moment, Ian?
Me, I'm sitting in my patio.
In Joburg?
Of course.
Okay.
Joburg by the sea.
Yeah.
Wow. Joburg, is that Johannesburg?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the unfortunate consequences of the Sudanese campaign was that David Beatty came to the notice of Winston Churchill. And he was charismatic, but not necessarily efficient. And he later became an admiral of the fleet and messed up Dogger Bank and Jutland. And his ships couldn't shoot straight. Obviously, I'm a Jellicoe man.
But they look good, right, Duncan?
Yeah, and he also had interesting ways of signaling, and which confused the good Welsh Admiral Evans Thomas, who saved his bacon and then got crucified for it. Well, not literally crucified, but.
Am I right in thinking that you have a presentation coming up, Duncan, on the British Empire Study Group later in the year?
In December, yes.
Yeah, I thought I read that somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I like getting Duncan. I like getting everybody. I haven't had a dud presenter yet, but it's been really great.
Yeah, I know Duncan from I don't know how many years, or many years. We used to belong to the same stamp club in Brampton and in Canada here. That's probably 20 years or more, Duncan.
Yeah, slightly more than that. I think I still belong to Bramley when I moved to Deep River.
Yeah. Yeah, a long time ago.
It was interesting to move to the home of Canada's nuclear industry, given that I was born just outside Aldermaston, where my father worked when he was in one of the British nuclear establishments. So it was embarrassing when the Americans asked when I used my birth certificate as a second piece of identification. Said, "Oh, what's this? Engineer AWRE, American Water something or other?" I said, no, that would be the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment. They said, but you, that's why I always said that I was a chemist, because that's true, despite the fact I was also a nuclear engineer. Being a chemist was much safer.
As it is almost 2 o'clock in the morning for me, I think I'm going to go. It was lovely.
Thank you, Adele.
Guys.
Oh, it's wonderful having you behind everything.
Yeah, it's great.
Jamie, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Well done, and I'll leave at the same time. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Very interesting.
Well, thank you. And my wife is calling me for supper about a half hour ago.